This podcast includes unapologetic logic and reason and may not be suitable for all audiences. In a world full of nonsense, he's been called the voice of uncommon common sense. He sees the abnormal that many find normal. Author and award-winning speaker, he is Chris.
If you've been listening to this podcast at all over the past couple of weeks, you probably heard me talking about a book that I fell into, well, sort of. The book's called Hope for Survival. It's available at hopeforsurvival.com. I've been talking about it on more than one occasion, and the big question is why? And I'll just give you the big spoiler alert right now. I've been talking about this a little while, but I have the author on the phone. He's going to come back and explain a lot more about this. But the question is, why would I think that this is an important topic to talk about? Why would there be any need to for me to discuss the topic of survival? Why would I think that it's important? And the bottom line is there that I think that we have a moral responsibility. What do I mean by that? Well, do you have a family? Do you have neighbors? Do you have friends? Do you live in a community? Well, in a time of need, especially if there's a lot of people in need, like a mass disaster or mass disruption of services, all of a sudden there becomes this different level of reliance. And the more self-reliant you can be, the less of a burden you become on your family, friends, community, and so forth. Do you see what I'm saying? That's where I see that the moral responsibility comes into play, to at least dedicate yourself to a minimum level of preparedness, that you could take care of yourself, at least in maybe a lot of situations that would come down the pike. I think it's important for everybody to consider, and I think that the more people that do it, it makes us stronger as a country, makes us more resilient. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Less anxiety, less worry. I got to tell you, and Butch, the author here of Hope for Survival, is going to, I think, tell you very specifically, the government isn't going to take care of you. If you're depending on the government to run in and take care of you, you're making a big mistake if that's your fallback plan. Now, you can look at the data. I pulled up a little bit of data here on this to find out, what happens generally in the form of natural disasters. So for 2019, 73 people died from winter storms. And cold periods, ice, very deep cold periods, winter periods. 70 people died in severe thunderstorms, 16 tropical cyclones, 11 in wildfires, 7 in floods, 3 in earthquakes. I mean, what is that, 150, 200 people? You're saying, well, what is there to worry about? Well, nothing, I guess. You could just go back to playing around on Facebook or whatever you were doing. Never mind. I think the one thing I look at that, and it kind of verified to me, looking at this data, the importance, especially where I'm at, of making some preparation for wintertime. We get cold periods here where you could see, 0, 3, 5, 10, 12 degrees. Those are all very dangerous temperatures, and we can experience something like that for an extended period of time. What if it's the whole community? And there's a variety of ways that something like that could happen. Are you going to be an asset to the community, or are you going to be a burden to the community? I'm setting it up that I'm going to be an asset to the community. I'm going to have heat on hand to deal with that exact situation. And I don't want to get too much into the details because we've got the expert on the phone here, and he's going to talk through this a little bit more. But my point is this. You look at this data, you say, well, a couple hundred people die. Most of it's from winter storms. I'll get a couple extra blankets, end of story, right? I think that you have to look at what's going on in our country and around the world. Look at all of those stories, not just in disconnected sound bites, but in terms of everything that's going on, some of it connected, some of it loosely connected. Look at what's going on. Look at what just happened just a short time ago. We couldn't get toilet paper, and that was the big joke, right? Everybody went crazy over toilet paper. What do you think is going to happen if people get hungry or people are freezing to death? It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. I want to get Butch on the phone right now. Let's see if we have this all working here. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and trying to get it work always seems to be a challenge. And of course, I'm having a problem. Butch, are you there? Hold on. Butch, are you there?
Yes.
All right, we did it. Butch, Hope for Survival at hopeforsurvival.com. Welcome to the podcast. You and I have talked several times. You've been a big inspiration to me, and I appreciate that. I really appreciate the book. You know, I was telling the story a few podcasts ago. I opened it up, and I started getting into it. And, you know, I love to read. I read just about every day, at least 5 days a week, I would say. And I was just really tied up for whatever reason. I was like a week into it, and it was only like 10 pages or something like that. And then I found a little bit of time to dig into it and ended up reading like 2/3 of the book. Then that night I stayed up late and then finished the rest the next day. It's a fantastic book. What drove you to write it? Why did you do that?
Well, first, Chris, let me tell you, thank you. I appreciate you reading the book, and I also appreciate the fact of that you've been speaking of the book on your podcast, and I love your podcast as well as some of my friends who are now listeners. They really like your message and what you're doing. So to your question, why did I write the book? Good question. I'm pretty blessed. You know, I had the opportunity to spend 20 years in the U.S. Air Force.
Sorry to hear that.
I traveled abroad, and I got to spend a lot of time in third world countries. I worked in security and law enforcement. My last 8 years, I worked in supporting SOCOM and JSOC as a security advisor. Then I retired from the Air Force, and I went back to school and got my master's, and I was working in terrorism, counterterrorism in my day job, and I got into emergency management. So I took all of the principles of these skills that I was blessed to learn. I had great leaders and supervisors, and I took these past experiences and I said, how can I use these to help other people? I'd always dreamed of writing a book. It was kind of a joke. I'm going to go to Montana for a year, rent a cabin, live on the side of a hill, and I'm going to write a book. Well, I never knew what to write a book about, right? So I basically used all these skills. I looked at the world we live today. I looked at man-made natural disasters and so forth. And I used the book as a platform to get the message out, to try to help other people to, you know, coming out of the military, there's a lot of things we're afforded that the average American doesn't get exposed to.
So Butch, there was there's a story in the book that you referred to that was kind of a pivotal moment. So you're working in the whole emergency preparedness field, right? And
Yes.
You, of course, you have a passion for it, and you're thinking get the message out. But there was a pivotal incident, I think, in the book that you talk about. Is that something you want to talk about?
Sure. Back around 2011, living in northern Alabama, April of 2011, from Mississippi to Virginia, we were absolutely devastated from tornado. Multiple. I believe we had 4 or 5 Cat 5s that went through our region. Total destruction. But the things that I witnessed was how humans reacted from this event. No ice, food shortages, no utilities, loss of water, and so forth.
How many people affected in that? Do you remember about how many?
Thousands.
Thousands. Okay.
There were thousands from Mississippi to Virginia.
And what kind of duration? What kind of duration was there a loss of services on average? A week, 2 weeks, a month?
Week to 10 days.
Okay.
Depending where you're at.
And so
we also had in our region a nuclear power plant, right? So it was impacted as well. But drilling down, it was the people around me, the average citizen that had grown up in this region, which is known as Tornado Alley, who were not prepared. They didn't have batteries. They didn't have flashlights. They had no food staples put back, no candles, and so forth.
How soon into the process, Butch? You said the whole thing, on average, services were disrupted for a week to 10 days. A lot of people that had lived there not prepared for that. At what point, how many days in did you start to see problems?
The first notice of a resource that was critical, that was impacting life or death. I had went to a local dollar store and a few places, and I bought all the bagged ice I could get, and we were loading it on trailer, and they were taking it out to the first responders who were trying to restore critical infrastructure. And while in the grocery store, I noticed there was a gentleman that had bought like 3 or 4 bags of ice, and there was an elderly lady who was trying to buy 1 bag of ice. They were out of ice, and this gentleman would not give her a half bag or a bag of the ice that he had purchased, and she needed it to put insulin for her husband's for his diabetic medicine. She had no way of keeping it chilled, and it basically turned into a very negative verbal exchange. But the point was that this gentleman who made the comment that he needed to keep his adult beverages on ice to keep them cold while there was no electricity and it was hot outside. But he would not share this with the elderly lady to help her. That was kind of the beginning of it. This lady's husband's needed medicine was now critical.
I'll tell you, Butch, I say this as a combat veteran. In those situations, I feel like I've gotten to see the worst of humanity and the best of men. I've also said that, difficult times bring out the best in people, bring out the worst in people, kind of saying the same thing. And I try to get people to think about that in advance, which side of that they want to be on. And that's a perfect example, So let me just back up a second here, because this probably answers my second question automatically. But all right, this is an area prone to tornadoes. I'm not in an area prone to tornadoes. Why should I care about any of this? Well, I witnessed this here just recently, and we've had a few, actually. Fortunately, where I'm at, we've been largely unscathed, but high winds, I forget they got a name for them. All these new terms coming out now. I can't keep track of it, but these high-velocity winds came in, and it wasn't a tornado, but given the amount of trees that we have here and the overhead electric transmission, it was a big problem. Roads couldn't open and things like that. And so it wouldn't take much. And I've said this before. I mean, the idea of, systems failures for a week to 10 days is not an uncommon occurrence. And I think, like you said, that most people don't realize, number one, they're so prepared for something like that, and how quickly the problems are going to start to become monumental. If you don't have water, if you don't have food, if you don't have a toilet. I talked about this on the podcast. I got a few laughs back when people sent me emails about it. If you're relying on your public water and sewer system, if you're in town and there's a failure in that system, I realize it doesn't happen a lot, but if it does happen. I mean, look at Flint, Michigan. There's plenty of other examples. You don't have a toilet. If you got one toilet that's not, a couple of toilets in your house that aren't working, you have no other options, and you're not on a big piece of property that you can just go dig a hole, you got a problem, my friend, a big problem. And
sanitation's critical.
Critical, yeah. And anyway, it's a lot to think about, and I think that's, my next question was going to be, like I said, why should the average person be thinking about preparedness? But
can I give a shot at that one?
Yeah, go for it.
Here's when most people think of preparedness, they think of, okay, we're planning for natural and man-made disasters. I take it a step beyond that. Okay, we have a personal responsibility to ourselves and to our family to prepare for daily incidents that can occur: a car wreck, long-term sicknesses, job loss, and then add all the other, the COVID-19, EMPs, tornadoes, hurricanes, derecho. You have all these things that can impact your way of life. My goal, through how I approach it, is to help a family prepare for all these different types of incidents that can occur that are life changers, and help this individual to be self-reliant along with their family up to building to their neighborhood, wherever that may be, that if we have these life-changing events, when FEMA and the government rolls in to deal with critical infrastructure, these families can self-sustain. They're self-reliant. Because until critical infrastructure is put back in place, all of the basic necessities that we need to survive in life are secondary. We need hospitals. We need power restored. We need roads cleared. We need utilities. While you're hungry, they're working on these other items. So why not take the step to procure the resources that you determine that you need to take care of the ones you love?
Hey, Butch, you said you're talking about your passion there for making people aware of how to do this and what they should be doing. And I'll put you on the spot here. You and I talked about doing a free Zoom training, just
Yes.
kind of covering the basics. Is that still something you're happy to do?
Absolutely. As I've told you before, Chris, for every single person that we can help now, that is hopefully one person and family that when an event happens in their area, whether it's local or national, they can be self-reliant and self-sustained. We as humans here in America, we're rather spoiled. And oftentimes the things around us that we need are often provided to us. Hold
on a second. You use the word spoiled. And I think that the bigger issue there is taking for granted. And I think you and I are both saying the same thing on that. You cannot take for granted. Yeah, you're right. You can't take for granted that Uncle Sam and his minions are going to come rushing in with ice or food or whatever it is that you need. And I know everybody's used to today, Amazon took a week and they're leaving a bad review. You get into a situation like this and it looks a whole lot different. I want to touch on something else that you talked about, and I appreciate you bringing it up, and that's the first responders. And I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the labor that goes into the first responders is volunteers.
Yes.
And on top of that, I know you watch the press, defund the police, and everybody that works for government is bad. But the reality is, especially when it comes times like you describe with the tornado or times of an emergency, you'll see guys, women that are working hours, 24, 36 hours straight through without any sleep, dedicated to saving people's lives. And I think that if you really want to support that, you can help that by being less of a burden. Let alone being
self-reliance does help that. I mean, think about this. We here in America, we have car insurance, home insurance, health insurance, cat insurance, dog insurance. We have every kind of insurance out there. Sometimes it's forced on us. Sometimes it's not.
I'll tell you what I learned from you right now about insurance. I feel sorry for that guy having that ice for his drinks there, his cocktails, and then that woman. Of course, I would give my ice to the woman for the insulin, But right. I wouldn't want to be without ice either. I think I'm going to get some ice insurance, Butch. Is there such a thing I can get?
Sure. Why not? I'll sell you some.
You wouldn't know because you're in the Air Force. Did you ever go without ice while you were in the Air Force? Tell me the truth.
Every hotel that we deployed to had ice machines. Okay.
Listen, why wouldn't
we were always prepared ahead of time? No ice machine, no contract to stay. That's just how it was.
Hey, why wouldn't people just get out? I mean, isn't that the real issue? Look, a tornado's coming. The hurricane's coming. Why don't people just get out of the way? Why do people have to live so close to the coast? Why? I'm here in Pennsylvania. I don't understand why people have to live on the San Andreas fault. Why? Why can't we just move to a safer place? Wouldn't that, or just get out when there's a problem? Wouldn't that be an easy answer, not stocking up and all this planning and nonsense?
Well, oftentimes folks can't get out. Well, the ones that can get out, oftentimes when the governor tells them to get out, they ignore it because it'll never happen. It'll never happen to me. It hasn't happened to me, so why should I think it's going to happen to me now? right? But there's also individuals who cannot get out simply because of transportation, finances, medical, or causes that mentally they believe, well, I'll just ride it out here because I can't leave, or I have a dog and they won't let me take a dog or a cat or whatever it may be. You know, the state in the system today, the state gives plenty of advance warning in most cases when they have advance warning that you need to get out. And when you don't, you're putting yourself at risk, and you're also putting those first responders at risk, right? And you would think when you're building your home on the coastline or on the earthquake fault line and so forth, when they start quoting you insurance costs, and if you do any homework as to the history of the terrain where you're building at, you would think those two factors alone would be enough to say, hey, you know, we need to go build somewhere else because there's odds here that are not in our favor. But it goes back again to you have all these insurances that are post-event fixes, recoveries, but the single most thing that we need as humans is food and water. Why do we not have extra food and water on hand for our family as an insurance policy to take care of us to be self-reliant?
Well, what do you say to somebody that says, "Oh, I'm not a prepper"?
What do I say to them?
Yeah,
I'm not either.
Okay.
I'm a preparer. There is a difference, and I love my prepper brothers and sisters. They're great people, you know. If you look up in the dictionary, a prepper is preparing for a single event. A preparer is preparing for all of those events that are out there that could possibly be life changers or threatening.
So what's the practical difference? The preppers, they're the ones that are preparing for the apocalypse, right?
Doomsdayers.
Doomsdayers, yeah. And so
Yeah.
you're saying that, all right, so many people have talked about survival and this issue of sustainability and many other related topics. It's not a new issue. It's been around a long time. Why do you think there's so much of it going on right now? Why the buzz all of a sudden?
A lot of it's trends, fear driven through the media. If you look at our country as a whole right now, we have a lot of problems. And a lot of them are not short-term fixes. You know, we're dealing with the COVID-19. We're dealing with economic issues. We're dealing with unemployment issues. We're dealing with some instability within the government. We're dealing with race issues. We could go on and on and on, right? But I can break down for you in almost every case, to include even when I do training on the website. I call it the 90% versus 10% groups. There's 90% of our populace who aren't prepared, and there's 10% who are prepared, 5 to 10%, that when an event happens, we basically have everything we need and we step back away from where the problem's at. Good example, COVID-19, right? Everyone's running out to the store and they're buying up the shelf items and they're buying all the toilet paper, and the media comes out and says, all them darn preppers. Well, actually, it's not.
Right. It was the opposite.
We have everything that we need.
Right.
So,
it was the people that weren't ready.
You've got 90% of the populace going into the stores, and there's an invisible threat called COVID-19 that people are carrying. You can't see this threat, but yet they're mingling to buy all these items. So those who are prepared and self-reliant are stepping back away. You know, we have our own preparedness plans, communication.
Well,
plans,
you bring up
but
you bring up a good point about the COVID-19 and the toilet paper thing. I mean, isn't that the reality that all this is just scare tactics? I mean, you look at the data that I read through here before you came on. Let me give you the data from 2019. Here's deaths in the United States. I'll go backwards. 3 deaths from earthquakes, 7 from floods, 11 from wildfires, 16s from tropical cyclones, 70 from severe thunderstorms, 73 from winter storms and cold weather. I mean, this is statistically insignificant, the number of people that are dying in natural disasters. Isn't the whole thing just a bunch of scare tactics at the end of the day?
So during COVID-19, do you know what I felt? I didn't have to mingle because we were already prepared. But do you know, to me, what was the biggest threat? It wasn't COVID-19. It was the 90% of the populace in the stores fighting over toilet paper. Those are the individuals that I don't want to be around when they're fighting over the last bag of ice, or they're fighting over toilet paper, or the last bag of potatoes. I don't want to be a part of that.
Well, you hit the nail on the head with that, Butch. Absolutely. I'm 100% agreement with you. And that's, I think, one of my points, too. No, I'm agreeing with you. I was never really afraid of the coronavirus personally. And I've, talked about this for many weeks on the podcast. But right. Absolutely, I was concerned about the civil unrest that was going to follow with it, as I continue to be. Even right now, I'm concerned about economic issues, as you mentioned, social unrest. And I think the big thing that is very real, that is not a scare tactic right now. Well, I mean, I'll ask you, you're the expert. What would you say on a scale of 1 to 100, the likelihood that any citizen in the country in the next 12 months will experience some kind of disruption in supply chain or utilities or something along those lines? What's the likelihood?
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence with the word expert, but I don't consider myself an expert. I just read a lot. I study a lot, like you were mentioning, numbers and trends, history in other countries.
Well, that's good. That's good. That's good. Now you're ready to run for Congress because you didn't answer the question.
No, I will answer your question. I actually listened to a lot of interviews with managers and CEOs from different companies that were part of the whole food chain process. We were reading where vegetables, thousands of pounds of vegetables were being thrown out and they were rotting, and
yes,
dairies were selling off. And, we had all the pigs killed and all the beef that was killed and drowned 2 years ago out in the floods in Nebraska and the wildfires in Texas and California. The problem wasn't the availability of the resource. The problem has been in the packing material, the cans. They're not available.
Well, there's some kind of disruption
shipped in from outside the country. But the highest, a good example, a friend of mine drinks a particular beverage, like 5%, 5 carbs and so on. He can't get it anymore. So when he talked to the manager about why they're no longer getting it, he said, because there's a shortage of available cans to put soft drinks, and therefore the large Coca-Cola, Pepsi type companies are the high bidder, and they're getting the resource. Therefore, they're leaving out the smaller companies until the resources are available.
I talked about this the other day on the podcast. I said, I know that there's a supply chain problem right now with fleet automotive parts. And yes. I don't drink soda. I could give a hoot about your buddy and his soda cans. Drink some water, for crying out loud. The same way I could give a hoot about somebody's fleet vehicle programs. I don't drive a lot. I could care less. I'm happy right here. But when that supply chain disruption in fleet automotive services begins to affect something that I do care about, all of a sudden it becomes a big problem. And I think that, the likelihood that we're going to see a problem is high. I don't know that anybody that disagrees with that. And I always say frequently, I don't have a crystal ball. And I saw your last video. You did a great job with your soccer ball, crystal ball example. But what do you say is the likelihood of any American citizen incurring problems over the next year?
I think it's highly likely, and it could be not from one event, but it could be from events chaining together to cause larger problems.
Absolutely. I think we're saying the same thing.
Feeders off of one another. So the whole goal here is when, for myself or those who want to be prepared, the biggest step is not getting the resources to be prepared. It is changing your mindset.
Well, let's talk about that a second. I want to just, I don't think I followed through earlier. You graciously offered that we would do a free Zoom call. Look, this is going to be an opportunity for anybody that listens to the podcast, or if you're a fan of Hope for Survival already and you want to hop on a quick Zoom call. I think we'll probably keep it relatively, I like to do in these things, keep it like short, like 39 minutes, right? That's within most people's attention spans. And then we can hang out longer and talk to people, whoever wants to talk longer. But I think it'll be a great opportunity for people to connect with Butch and understand what he's doing. And you get an opportunity to see me if that's helpful. Most people find that detestable, but there will be 2 or 3 that look forward to it. Trust me on that. And if you want, we haven't picked a date for anything like that. We're going to cover the basics of getting started. What is the minimum threshold that you should be ready for? And I'm going to tell you something. This is going to be important training that if you listen to it is going to cover 80% of what you could potentially see going forward, go a long ways. And you don't have to spend a lot of money. And don't comment on that, Butch, because I know you'll go on a run. I don't want to get into that right now. We'll do it on that call. But if you want to participate in that free training, you just sign up for my email list at ChristopherScottShow.com. If you go visit HopeForSurvival.com, which I highly recommend, if you sign up for the email list there, Butch will also mention it to everybody that signed up for his email list. We'll send that out and we announce the date. And I'll be talking about it on the podcast and so forth. But bottom line, if you're interested in that training, an opportunity to connect with Butch and I on a more personal level there, answer any questions you might have, sign up for our email list, ChristopherScottShow.com or HopeForSurvival.com. So, we talked about a lot here, and that is that, look, these types of situations, meaning a situation where you and your family are going to be in need of basic resources, is a common occurrence. It happens regularly, whether it's 2 hours or it's 2 days that the roads are closed for snow or flooding or wind damage or whatever the case might be. And then you get into this other level of situations that are maybe a week to 10 days. And as you pointed out from your experience, I've never experienced anything like that, not directly anyway, other than my combat experience. And that is not a bad example. When you look at the number of people that were displaced as a result of that, it's pretty crazy. That's a whole different situation. But, there is a mental aspect that comes into play, right? And I've said frequently, if you're going to determine what your escape route is when the fire alarm's going off, you're going to have a hard time with that, my friends. When you're choking on smoke and wondering where your kids are, and even if you get past all that, and now you got to decide, is it the dog or the family photo album, it's not the time to plan. And even the use of basic checklists. And I think you talk about checklists in the book, Butch. Am I right about that?
Yes, actually. In the book, I cover what's called the 5-5-5 plan, 5-second, 5-minute, and 5-hour plan. And I have folks that actually use that are followers of Hope for Survival, and they do these test evacuations in the middle of the night for their families with their kids. What kind of event, say a fire, 5 seconds you have from the point of alarm, you got 5 seconds to get out. So are you going to just run out and stand in the sleet? Or have you pre-packed bags that everyone grabs and goes out? Maybe you have a cache with some dry clothes, some cash stashed away, some food that covers you until you can get reestablished again, get some warmth and dry and a roof over your head. That's part of your planning. So often when folks say, well, I always ask people up front, if they say, can you help me? I say, well, what are you preparing for? Because it's important that the individual understands the greatest tool they have in their toolbox, Chris, is their mind. And they have to adjust their mind to take control of their household and their family to be the leader and start addressing these things, whether it's with checklists to have for disasters in their home. You basically got to do a self-assessment of yourself as an individual, spiritually, psychological, and physical. You need to know who you are. Second, you need to address these topics with your family. How are you as a family going to go about approaching different type disasters? And you work together. You teach your children how, hey, if the alarm goes off, grab your bag and this is where we're going to meet at on the outside. Or a family member, adult, goes to gather the kids, ever how it may be, but you should never retract back into a disaster. If they don't have a backpack, teach the children to use a pillowcase. The Red Cross has a great program. I have Red Cross guidance and checklists on my website under Preparedness for Children. But then the family needs to start in a non-disaster point. They need to do a risk assessment of their circumstances. And then they need to determine, if you don't know what you're planning for, how do you plan? Right? If you don't know, I know folks that run out and spend thousands of dollars buying all kind of stuff, just tons of food and water and so on and so forth. But what are you planning for? If you don't, you can't have a plan if you don't know what the threat is to you.
That's a big part. That's a big part of what you talk about is the budget aspects of it. And I think it's good because it's a very real issue. I want to read something here because I think it kind of makes the point that I was trying to make leading up to this, and you cover this in the book on page 13. You say, few rarely consider that they're 9 meals away from the beginning of starvation. There's a national mindset the government will come to rescue and save the day. Then when that doesn't happen, it's because the president in office is a racist or hates a particular race or socioeconomic class. How about a greater insult to the ego? You're not a high priority to the government. And that really is very true. Not that there aren't resources that won't be dispatched, but it's not going to be door-to-door delivery. And I don't think it takes the form of what people are looking for, nor is it very reliable in many cases. Look at what happened in Puerto Rico. I forget which hurricane it was, but they couldn't logistically get to certain places on the island. They just couldn't happen. And you never know. I've seen places, and this is many places in Pennsylvania, where 2 downed trees could cut off access to a particular area for weeks.
Exactly. So what are you going to feed your starving children who are looking at you with those starving eyes saying, "Daddy, I'm hungry"?
Right.
Well, how are you going to take care of them when you did not take steps in advance to set aside the items you need to keep them fed, watered, warm, and safe?
Well, listen, you touched on the whole, you know what, you just brought up. This is the voice of wisdom right here, Butch. I got to tell you, every time I talk to you, you belt out so much rich stuff. And you just said it perfectly. I couldn't have illustrated it better. I said the moral aspect. I'll be damned if I'm going to look into the eyes of my 5-year-old daughter and tell her I have nothing to eat. Now, God willing, I don't have control over everything, but I do have control over me. And like I always say, I'm going to do the best I can. Look, I want to make sure that everybody understands we're going to offer this free training. This isn't anything pushy. This is something we're doing as a value added kind of thing. There's no cost. Just sign up for the email list, my email list at ChristopherScottShow.com. I'll email out when we set a date for that. Butch will as well. You can check out the book at hopeforsurvival.com. And I don't have any business relationship with Butch. I don't make any money off the book. This isn't a thinly veiled promotional thing. But Butch, you actually you make a pretty healthy profit on the book, right? You've been able to travel the world, purchase, and that's a success story in itself, right? All the money you're making from the book.
I'm surprised you got through to me when you called. Normally folks are waiting in line to talk to my secretary. I'm just kidding. Actually, we don't keep 1 penny from books sold, which is part of the whole reason why I wrote the book. It came about, it laid on my heart. What could I do with the blessings that had been afforded me in training in my past life and education that the taxpayers funded because I was in the military and a veteran. What can I return back to the people? So the wealth, Chris, that I'm getting is every family that I go out and visit, and I see them taking steps to prepare. And when they look at me, I've got retired folks that are well off, and they tell me they're doing it for their children and their family, their grandchildren.
It's very
that is the penny and nickels that I'm making off of this book and this effort and Hope for Survival.
That is very cute, Air Force. Are you going to release your tax returns or not?
I'd be happy to.
Hey, Butch, in all seriousness, and what I want to do here is I'm going to ask a last question, but I always love the conversation with you. I like to keep the podcast moving to be sensitive to people's time. I want you to give me, 3 kind of quick things or a couple ideas that anybody can do right now to really help their cause. And then normally I would wrap this up, but I would like to just continue the conversation with you if it's okay with you. We'll talk about that in a second, but give people a couple of quick takeaways, real quick. What I haven't done anything. I never cared about this stuff. Okay, I don't want my daughter to be hungry. What do I got to do, Butch? Give me some quick stuff I can do tomorrow.
Okay, since I was in the Air Force and I can't count, you said 3. I'm going to give you 4. How's that?
Very good.
You're getting a bargain.
Outstanding.
Okay, so the federal government and FEMA, which is part of the government, says that every American in the lower 48 should have 7 to 10 days of food and water. So that's a given right there. Here's my recommendation. If they're saying 7 to 10, then you need to go 14 to 21. Why? Because we're back to that 1090 number. When everyone runs out of food, you don't want to be part of the ones that run out of food. You want to be able to sustain past that point because you don't want to have to mingle in with those masses.
Or running out the minute that the businesses open back up from a pandemic. Exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts.
Yep. All right. So you're saying, what are you telling me? How long should I prepare for minimum?
Minimum 14 to 20 days.
Of what? Food and water?
Food and water.
What if
shelter, whether it's a roof over your head, a tent, some way to keep you and your family dry and warm.
All right. I said 3 quick things, Air Force. Let's keep it moving. We don't have all the time in the world. What's number 2?
The first one was food. The second one was water.
Yes.
Filtration. You need to have a way that you can filter dirty water if you don't have access to clean water. My theory is 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is better.
I love that saying.
Filtration straw, then you also need Clorox or some type of drops as a backup to your filtration straw.
Yes, sir. And that's exactly right. Yep. What? Say that again. 1 is what?
1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is better.
I already knew that. I just wanted to hear you say it. All right.
I can show you my cell phone sometime, and I have that when I open the light on my phone. That is what is on my phone as a daily reminder to me.
Well, good. Let's stay on point. So 1 is food, 2 is water, 3 is have a backup. What's 4?
3 is shelter.
3 is shelter.
And 4 is a way to protect your family from those without.
You mean a gun?
If you've got 1 peanut butter cracker left and there's people around you starving because they don't have any, are you going to give it to your 5-year-old daughter, or are you going to give it to those without?
I'm going to say a prayer to the Holy Father and start breaking it up, and I'm fairly certain there'll be enough pieces to go around. Hey,
now, to be safe here, to not give a bad message, part of planning our food is we have food set aside for those that didn't plan.
Oh, I thought you were going to say we were going to shoot them. This is the part right.
But here's the thing. You don't hand that food out of your front door, because then everyone lines up at your house. So you're going to have to figure out, based on where you're at in your neighborhood or urban, suburban, rural, wherever you may be, how you're going to get that extra food that you build up and set aside portions of it out of your house and to where there's some form of a food line or food bank.
Well, you're getting into the 2.0 class. Let me recap real quick, and then if you're cool with hanging out, Butch, we'll hang out for a little conversation. But I think the important takeaways for everybody listening today, number 1, if you want to participate in the training, we'll go into all this in more detail. and you get an opportunity to connect with Butch and I directly, and you can ask any questions you might have. It should be a lot of fun, I think. If you want to get involved in something like that, I'm expecting it's going to be a small group. I don't see us having 1,000 callers on the line or something like that. But if you're interested in that, go to ChristopherScottShow.com, sign up for my email list, or you can go to hopeforsurvival.com. Look, Butch isn't making any money off the book. I'm not making any money off the book. This isn't about money. This is about helping you. If you're interested in the book, it's what's really cool about it. Butch had it spiral bound, and it lays flat. And it ends up being like a workbook. And after talking to Butch, when I got it, first thing I was doing was scribbling notes through there. And, look, I think Butch does a great job of doing something that really appealed to me. Look, I don't want to be told exactly what to do. I'm going to develop my own plan. And Butch has a little bit of both in there. If you want to follow what he has exactly, there's that. But I'm going to tell you, it'll get you thinking in ways that you hadn't thought, even if you consider yourself somebody that's well prepared, wherever you're at in that. I consider myself somebody that has always maintained a certain level of self-sustainability, and I learned a lot from the book. And I think what Butch is saying today, and a message that I've been trying to put out on the podcast, you want to be 14 to 20 days, food, water, shelter, and some kind of protection. I don't want to get into the whole Second Amendment gun debate here today. That's a topic for another day and something that we will cover on the podcast. But I will say this, and I think it ties in a lot with something that Butch was saying. You have to take a good hard look at yourself and determine where you stand and all that. I don't think it's a fair expectation that everybody's going to draw arms and shoot it out to the death. As a matter of fact, I know that that's not going to happen. Some people aren't capable, either mentally or physical or both. And just remember this, the chicken that turns and runs lives to fight another day. There's other ways to fight. It doesn't always have to be with firearms. If you're a firearms person, as am I, great. Then you can move to the front lines. But there's a place for everybody, and just give that some thought. And there's a lot of other weapons or self-defense tools that are available, and I don't want to overcome that with this either. But if you want to talk about it more, go to ChristopherScottShow.com, sign up for the email list, and or go to hopeforsurvival.com. Check out the book. Butch, what's the price?
The price of the book is, if you buy it off the website or in person, it's $25, and then it's $250 shipping and handling.
So $27.50, less than $30. The profits of that go to the local food shelter down there. And look, you'll get a lot out of the book. I highly recommend it. Hopeforsurvival.com. Hopeforsurvival.com. Check it out. Spend a few minutes. Hopeforsurvival.com. Butch, a couple things before I kind of roll into the next phase of this. I'll tell you, having to get to spend some time with you, it's really been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. I can't thank you enough personally.
Thank you, sir. Same here. I've enjoyed all of our conversations.
It's been a lot of fun and very meaningful to me. And I have heard from some of your people that have come over and listened to the podcast. I welcome you. I welcome all of you. Thanks for coming by, and thanks for your support of Hope for Survival. Listen, I'll tell you that, for the listeners or for the followers of Hope for Survival and people that might be listening to the podcast, hey, one of the best compliments you can pay us is to refer it to somebody else. And if Butch and his book have impacted you, hey, the best thing that you can do to help the people that you know and care about is to refer that to them. And for me, I've got a couple of friends. I might buy a couple of these copies just to give away to people to hopefully pique their interest on these types of this whole conversation, I should say. But so I'm just going to use myself for a couple of minutes, Butch, to kind of just talk through how I'm looking at this, and you've already given me a lot of feedback. One of the big things that I got, and I consider if on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best in terms of preparedness, and I don't mean 10 being the best in terms of total world shutdown forever. I mean total preparedness and being able to go for a reasonable amount of time. On a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 being the best, I would have given myself maybe a 6 or a 7. After looking at your book, I realized how inadequate that was, because you made me start thinking about vulnerabilities. And
Right.
security was one of them. All of the security that I had in place, and I'll start with that, vulnerabilities, and looking at the different categories, because my thought was always food and water, food and water. And then we lost power here a couple of times where, we would be down for, I don't know, call it 36 hours twice. And because of that, we lost our oil heat because the circulator pumps couldn't run. And we didn't have water because we're on a well and the pump couldn't run. And, when the house goes quiet, you realize how vulnerable you are. And I thought, man, if this went on for a week or 2 or 3, I would be in some deep what.
Right.
And so the book got me to thinking a lot about that. What would you say are the broad categories that, I kind of have an idea, but how would you spell it out, the big categories people need to be thinking about? You talked about food and water and shelter, but there's a little more, right?
Yeah, and a lot of it depends on whether you're urban, suburban, or rural. Depends on, are you kind of the Lone Ranger out on the big ranch, or are you in an apartment building, or you live in a suburban neighborhood? The basics that I look at when I go out in the field and do a risk assessment or try to help folks when I'm doing it in training class, and I give them forms that they can go through. I already have them filled out just as examples. I look at food, water, shelter, security, communications. I look out to the community level from where their home's at. What are the 5 top threats that they may face within a 5-mile radius? Is it gangs, unemployed, homelessness? Are there food shortage problems? Do you have water problems? How dependent are you and your home upon services provided to you, which is your 1? What is your number 2 to make 2 is 1 as a backup? And do you have possibly a third source to back up your secondary, and if you lose city or town utilities?
And you're talking about electric, water, sewer, and whatever your heating source is, right?
Yes.
Yep. If there's a disruption in those.
So let's say you have a food plan, right? And my theory, and it's just me, like I said, I'm not an expert. My theory is if you have something that is prolonged, like an instability that just continues to where you have got to be self-sustainable, or your community your neighborhood. You can only, a lot of folks go out and spend money and they'll buy like a year's supply of dehydrated foods. You were in the military. You know what it was like eating MREs and nothing else, right? Well, try dehydrated foods and what they do to your body. So can you grow a garden? You don't have to have a plot of land. You can do upright gardens. You can grow them on the rooftop of an apartment, or you can grow them in the windows.
Have you ever
grown any before? If you've never grown anything, you're putting your life on the fact that you think you can do it. What if it doesn't work? Then what?
So you and I had this conversation privately a couple of weeks ago, and you definitely piqued my interest. And believe me, I have never missed a meal, Butch. I mean,
nor have I.
And I'm like, whoa, you scared the hell out of me there. And yes, I do remember eating MREs for 3 meals a day, and at one point down to 2 meals a day. And I know what that's like as well. But so let me walk you through kind of what I did after talking to you. So when I originally talked to you, we always have in our pantries, more or less 30 days worth of food. I'm pretty sure if I went upstairs that, we could survive 30 days for what's in the refrigerator, freezer, and in our pantries there. And even if we lost our freezer or something like that, I think there's enough staples there and off our own fat stores that we already have in our body, we'd survive for 30 days. And you definitely got me to thinking about the water, but I want to stay focused on the food thing a second. And I did plant a garden this year just by chance, and we just moved down here, so I could tell the soil wasn't very good. It hasn't really worked out very well is the short part of that. And I wasn't planning it when I planted it for any idea of, any kind of meaningful harvest. I actually did it as a kind of a little project with my daughter just to teach her where food comes from. So here's what I've done. We have on hand, I have one more trip to the food store basically, and I will have on hand good 2 months worth of food and water, right? 8 weeks. We also have the filtration straws that you mentioned. I got some extra in case anybody in need needs one. I like that. I got the water treatment pills as well. So, and then we've got a generator, and that was the biggest investment I made. But with the food, what I decided to do, because keeping a pantry of things that you use all the time and circulating that and keeping it so it's not getting old, whether it's canned goods or dry goods, it's quite a bit of effort to do that. And the longer that you plan to sustain yourself on what I'll call regular foods, the harder that process gets. And you better have a lot of room because all of a sudden that stuff gets big quick. And at that point, the dehydrated food becomes much more of a convenient option. And I've got an order in right now for 3 months of that. I'm just waiting for it to be delivered. So we'll be at the 5-month mark. And then I'm getting ready to order some heirloom seeds. And what is the key to that? If anybody listening doesn't know, most of the seeds that you get today, you buy seeds at Lowe's by and large, those are genetically modified. And you not likely be able to produce seed from the plant. So if you really got into a situation where you not only had to harvest the crops, but then, rely on your harvest to also create new seeds, you want heirlooms. And I'm getting into a level of complexity on all that. But basically, I have a plan that if we needed to go to full sustainable crops, I'm not going to employ that right now, but I am going to expand our garden that would give me enough time. I want to end up with about a year's worth of food on hand, 12 months, the ability to grow through at least a cycle, and then the ability to expand there. I would like to be able to reach a point of full sustainability if we had to. I'm hoping to avoid that because I don't want to become a farmer, but that's kind of the plan. And I guess there's a variety of ways people could approach that. You talked about, going to the dollar store to pick up a few extra things. I mean, what would your advice be to somebody who's got to get started?
Yeah, the dollar store actually, there's a lot of people, I'm not eating food from the dollar store. Well, have you ever been hungry before? A lot of the food that I keep, a lot of the dollar store food, Chris, I keep in my bags. Right. I keep a bag at my desk in the case we have an emergency at work and it just changes life for the time period. I have some protein that I can get to. So I have some canned meat, tuna, things like that I can keep at my desk. I keep a short-term bag in my truck. It's called my like an everyday carry or end-of-day carry, that if my vehicle breaks down, I got to walk and it's a while before I get home, I have what I need to take care of me, food, water, shelter, and protection for that period. Then I have a large bag. So we have all this food at our house, but what if we're away from home? What if we're away from home and something happens and we can't get home for a day, 2 days? Or what if we're trapped in our vehicle from a car wreck? And we can't get out of our car and we're, say, over the side of a hill and they haven't found us yet. How are you going to sustain? Well, if you have that bag in your car, it's behind your seat. Should be. You can reach behind your seat and pull that bag out. You got first aid, you got a whistle, you got a life straw, you got some food. Things to be self-reliant until the system catches up to you. So now to your house. Having heirloom seeds is awesome. Everyone should have heirloom seeds because you've got to have multiple types of food to sustain yourself if it's for a period of time. Canned foods from a store, dehydrated or freeze-dried foods as well, food from your garden, we personally, we can vegetables from our garden. We can meat, chicken, beef, pork, and so forth. So if I'm stuck eating dehydrated foods, I can rotate and throw in some canned chicken, or I can throw in some canned beef to offset that dehydrated food with some quality protein.
Oh, I skipped over that. You bring up a great point there. So that was my thought, right? So we're going to have a mix of, regular pantry food, dry staples, garden, and the dehydrated stuff. So my thought would be, we would assess the situation. If our situation was down trees, and I thought that our risk maybe it was a 2-week mark, maybe it bleeds into a month, I'd probably just go off my pantry rations, there and pretty much live like normal. But if I felt that it was going to be a year, I would put the rest of the family on the dehydrated stuff. I would live off the pantry stuff as long as I could. And as long as I had ice for cocktails, I think I'd be in pretty good shape. I don't know. What else do I need to worry about?
Yeah, so if you want to keep it cold, go find you a stream somewhere and drop them down in the stream to keep them chilled, and work on your bronze tan while you're chilling, and you can carry the 5-gallon bucket of water back to the family to make their dehydrated meals. Right?
Well, there's a pond. There's actually 2 ponds near us. The closest one is probably I don't know, maybe 100, 120 yards away. So not bad if we had to pull from there. My backup water deal, and I highly recommend this, is I'm going to put a couple of rain barrels in. It's great for the environment. You can use it to water food if you're growing food. And if you don't use it at all, it's just great for the environment. It's great to reduce stormwater runoff and pollutant runoff and all the problems associated with that. You wouldn't think that a little barrel would make a difference, but with enough people doing it, it does make a big difference. And then it just creates this nice storage container. And for us, I'm like, man, 50 gallons of storage, if we just went down to a minimum drinking water, we could probably live off that for a month if we had to. So we'll probably go with a couple of rain barrels we'll be adding in there if we can't get water from our well or what have you. And I'd rather pull from my own, just as me personally, I'd rather pull from my own rain barrel than to have to worry about walking down the road and carrying buckets. And here's the other thing that you got me to thinking about. I think that a lot of people tend to think of this in a very linear fashion. Like, what if there's a hurricane? What if there's a fire? What if there's social unrest? Yeah, what if it's more than one? And the likelihood of that happening it becomes high in certain situations. You see this with looting. And so my point is, and it doesn't even have to be that level of crazy. The pond down the street that's 100 yards away, it would be a great place for us to pull from. It's absolutely on our list. But we have cold winters here. And it wouldn't be inconceivable that, it would be very difficult to get down there carrying a bucket of water. And there's also a very high chance that it's going to be frozen, in which case I've now got to carry tools to break free from all that. And you start adding all that together, and it goes back to your point. 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is 2. And 4 is even better, I guess you could say. But anyway, it's great, the stuff that you put out there, and I think the way it got me to thinking about these different things.
So something else you could consider on your pond is, how far did you say, 100 yards maybe?
Yeah, something like that, 100, 150. I never really measured it.
So you could actually drop a hose into your pond and run a hose or PVC, ever how you want to do it. You can actually run that to your house and go to the city landfill and get an old wash machine pump. And you could actually, depending on the elevation and all that, you'd have to figure out that part of it. But you can actually use a pump to pull water out of your pond up to your house. And that way, if there's a threat out there, you're not out walking that 100 yards down and 100 yards back, toting, the water.
Interesting idea. Very interesting.
You could just pull it. But keep this in mind on the resources part. On average, the estimate is 1,050 gallons of water per person per year.
So 100 gallons a month, basically?
Yeah, it's roughly, depending on the body size, anywhere from 2 to 4 gallons of water a day.
Interesting. Well, that's probably...
And then the sanitation issue. If you're going to use sanitation in your home and chug water into your toilets to, flush down for a period of time, or whatever how you want to do it, but, you're going to need water for that too.
Well, certainly long term, right? Yeah, that's why I thought the rain barrels, become a nice source. And I think with our roof size here, I feel like we've got plenty of room that other than the most arid times, which isn't very often around here, that
they'll fill fast.
Yeah, they'll fill up fast.
You get a good rain, and if it's during the winter months. There's actually a way, I have a paper plan in my paper library. There's a way that you can actually pull the water from your rain barrels through a PVC pipe, and then you build a 12 by 12 roughly wooden box, and you run the PVC, snake it inside the box and cover it in mulch about 8 to 12 inches deep, and it actually heats the PVC tubes and the water that's in it. So you could use a pump to pull the water from there, and you're going to have semi-heated water, which in the wintertime it's better than cold water.
Absolutely, it is. I actually just ordered a 5-gallon solar shower kit, and it's generally used for camping, and we may use it for camping as well. It's something I wanted for. It was like $25-$30, and I'm with you. I've not spent a lot of money, and I carved out a couple of little spaces in the house that weren't getting used for anything. I'm going to probably be, and I've spent more than I needed to. I don't even want to say because I don't want to hinder people with different budgets. And I kind of looking at it like, how can I, if I have to get into a very long range problem like we discussed, but I'm trying to take it in steps. And the first one for me is just a season, 120 days, 4 months, that if we were totally disconnected, and I go back to that issue of the winters here. If we lost power, if we were totally disconnected right now in July, we would be fine. We would largely be fine with what we have. You get into January, February, and it becomes a whole different situation here in a lot of different ways. And that heat issue becomes as big a problem as the food and water, if not more important in some ways. And that's the big thing that I'm solving right now. For me, the solution is simple. Getting it done requires a little bit of work, and that's just getting enough firewood in here that, we've gotten them out. And I've got some other backup sources too. We've got the generator, so as long as we can keep that fueled. And you were talking about sistering the rain barrels together and piping underground. We could get some geothermal heat. I was thinking about the fuel capacity for the generator. And I have 15 gallons on hand that I'm keeping here, which is about what I can reasonably deal with on an annual basis, because the reality is I'm not going to use it, and I'm going to end up dumping into my car at the end of the season. No big deal. I can't really – it's hard for me to store 1,000 gallons of fuel here right now. So I bought an extra 2 cans. So I'm like, well, at least if I get some advanced warning, I can go get another 10 gallons. And then the other thing that I got was I got a little, squeeze bulb siphon. And I thought, wow, we've got 2 cars in the driveway. There's another 30 gallons of capacity that we could add to the mix if we were fueled up. So I think those creative ideas a lot of times, but that's what I like about the book, Butch. You did a great job of, I think, encouraging people to think about their situation, what they might encounter, how it might affect them, and what they can do about it.
Yeah, we're all different. We all have different needs. We're different ages. We're different body sizes. We have different, socioeconomic backgrounds and current status. And so the goal is to give you a framework. And then, if you want help, then we'll help you. If you live in a 3-bedroom apartment, guess what? We'll help you. There's a way you can actually prepare living on the 3rd floor of an apartment. So the biggest thing, Chris, which, kind of is how the title of the book came about. Hope. If we don't have hope, what do we have? Right? Hope has to be a part of your motivation. It has to be part of your inspiration. We have to give hope to other people,
Well, it's a great...
They give up and they can't move forward. We've got to be able to put our hand out and give them hope.
Well, you bring up a great point, Butch, and I think it's a great way to wrap it up. When I talk about the moral implications, I think a lot of times what you see in disasters is that people end up largely dazed and confused. They don't know what to do, who to turn to, and you get all these different problems that surface in ways that people couldn't imagine. And if you can be one of the few people that actually prepares and does a little bit of work, you go a long way to helping not only yourself, but the people around you. Butch, I can't thank you enough. And I look forward to doing the training with you and following up with the book on future podcasts. Really very enjoyable. I thank you for your time.
Or ever how we can get this message out, and if we touch one mind today, to uplift them, you know what? It's been a good day.
It has indeed. Butch,
thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks so much. God willing, I'll be back for the next podcast. Hope to see you there. Have a great day.